Which I don't think you can see it, but it does say Red Clay State Historical Park.
This is part of the Cherokee Nation.
Well,
you remember seeing some of them pictures I showed you around the grill and whatnot?
yeah, I remember those.
Daddy.
Yeah.
This is where it was at.
Okay. Where you and your dad were sitting at the picnic table?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, no, I don't know if it was that one or not. That might have been another spot. But that's something I think I showed you. That was during the last 2 years of my daddy's life. And those 2 years meant a lot to me. We'll go in there or keep going?
Just keep going. I know it's probably the park itself.
Yeah.
We'll go in there another day and we'll just bring the tripod with us and
Have a sit.
have a sit.
That last 2 years of his life was the only 2 good years I had with my daddy.
Well, you know, that's the sign saying we're exiting, basically. That's the other sign. So we drove through the park, but we didn't go into the park.
Through, kind of by it.
Yeah. Felt like you do when you go through DeSoto State Park. You kind of drive through it, but unless you turn off on one of the little roads, you're not exactly in it.
Right.
DeSoto State Park, y'all, is in the Fort Payne, Alabama area.
Yeah.
I used to have to drive through there all the time when I lived over that way.
But you see, folks, growing up, my daddy, he was an alcoholic. He had it bad. When he was about 40, he got the news he could quit then. Might be able to live out a somewhat normal rest of his life. Or he'd keep drinking. He'd be dead for his next birthday. Well, he finally got it up to be able to quit. He had a reason to. But, it wasn't just because it was in his life. Look at that old truck right there.
Yeah.
And,
That's a pretty house there, but
yeah.
I'm sorry, y'all. I know y'all can't see it through the blind spot on the window there.
There's some goats, look like goats back there.
Yeah.
But, he had another reason to quit and live for everything. That turned out bad in the end anyway.
Yeah.
At least he wasn't here for that.
Yeah,
Anyway, 14 years later, he was 53. He didn't make it to 54. Cirrhosis, complicated by emphysema, still got him in the end. And that last trip to the hospital, first went in there, he told me about a dream he had. And he hadn't told it to anybody else. He told it to me. He knew I was the one that could handle it. I was the brass tacksman. In his dream, he was walking along, come across the fence, and saw a guy peeking through a hole in the fence. Oohing and ahhing. He said, well, you mind if I take a look into that? Guy there said, sure. It's yours anyway. He said he peeked through there and he saw the most beautifulest grass and trees, basically countryside and whatnot. Well, I knew what that meant. It meant that was his last trip to the hospital. He was going home. And folks, when I was 15, I had one prayer. I asked God just to make sure he got it right in the end. Well, during that 14 years, he had a lot of life change, and he got back to church and all like that. When he died, come find out he was a prayer warrior that was looked up to by a lot of folks. His faith was strong. I told him at one time, I said, Dad, I said, you know, Lord would take all that off of you if you just asked for it. He smiled at me, a knowing smile. Then what I thought was being patronizing at the time, he said, you know, he said, I know that. He said, but sometimes the Lord's just got to slow you down so you can do what he's got for you to do. Yeah, it took me until I was just able to understand that. Because that's what the Lord did to me. I was trying to figure it out and everything. And I told the Lord, I said, I know you got something for me to do. I said, but you know, I can't do it and not have an income. And I didn't have a job. I was working an odd job. And everything tried to bring in a little bit. Me and Elaine and I got together by that time. And so, bam, next thing you know, I got hurt. It was the last blow. The straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, because it finally took out what was left of my neck. Finally went to the hospital. 2 months later, they couldn't believe it had been 2 months without him hollering around before coming to them. Gonna go right.
Yeah, let's get behind the bicycle.
And so anyway, I'd become disabled. Well, through all that, I figured out what Daddy was saying. And I figured out Lord let him get right in the end. He was far wiser than I could imagine. Figured out he knew some stuff I just wasn't privy to at the time. Maybe it's because I wasn't ready to receive it. That's the thing about truth. If somebody ain't ready to accept a certain level of truth, they ain't going to receive it. The only thing you're going to do if you try to push it on them is push them further away.
That's it.
Oh, look here, y'all. Is that a goat?
I don't know. Is it a goat?
That's a goat.
That's a goat. Out of the pen.
Yeah. And, but, yeah, that's the thing about truth. Well, anyway, during that 2 weeks, it was actually about a week and a half. About a week and a half later, they finally sent him home to die. Basically, his insurance run out. Left or right?
Right.
And so they sent him home to die.
Yeah.
But during that time in the hospital, as one day, now folks keep in mind they was keeping him on the max amount of morphine legally allowed at that time for the pain. And as one day, one young couple from his church had come in, and the pain was hitting him bad. The cramps from cirrhosis eating him up was hitting him bad. Both ends of his body was coming up sort of like a V sit-up like them professional bodybuilders do. But while his body was doing that, that young couple was looking at him, they had that look like, they didn't know what to say. What do you say, in a situation like that? His body doing all that, he turned his head, his eyes even on all that morphine, were just as sharp, crisp, and clear as the most sober person you'd ever know with Cleveland Highway.
I guess we turn right, head back down toward the house, huh?
Yeah. Well, his eyes just as clear and sober as anybody. He turned his head towards that couple and he said, "Don't worry about me." He said, "This ain't nothing compared to what our Lord went through." Now, folks, I'd always heard of a dying grace. The Lord be there with you to the bitter end. I got to see it that day. during that time, he also thought you could tell he was going between this world and that world. And I'll tell you why. There was one day, he was sitting there talking about how big and beautiful grasshoppers were. Now, folks, tell me the last time you saw a beautiful grasshopper, much less big. You know, that's one way you can tell. But then there was another day. This was towards the end. I had walked in, nobody else was there, and he turned his head to me, his eyes full of tears. Why won't they let me go home? I just want to go home. Why won't they let me go? Well, of course, y'all know that tore Piggy up. So I left out, not understanding. But it didn't take me long to get understanding. Daddy was ready to go home. Not to the house, but home to God in heaven. Well, I walked into the family waiting area, with the family together and all like that. Now keep in mind, folks, Daddy had a lot of trips back and forth to the hospital for pneumonia and hospital stays and all like that. Everything. But he was finally ready. He was ready to go home. He had it right. He was ready to go. I walked into that family waiting area, and there's every one of them in there praying, "Oh Lord, oh Lord, bring him through just one last time, Lord, just one last time, bring him through." Piggy went off. Piggy was not nice. Piggy went off in a bad way. Voice booming. I'm not sure what all I said, but basically I told them, I said, y'all have had 15 years plus with him. I've had 2. I'm going to miss him too. But he's ready to go home. He's got it right. He's suffered long enough. Here y'all are being selfish, wanting the Lord to bring him through one last time. Folks, I've heard too, when I left that room, they were all praying God's will. Because that's what you're supposed to pray. It's for God's will to be done. Because I got a clue for all y'all. God's will is going to be done anyway. We may not like it, we may not understand it, but God's will is going to be God's will. There ain't nothing we can do about it because it was written and set in stone from the very beginning. He knows everything that was going to happen. That's why I tell folks what is has to be, because it's already been done. He done wrote the book and closed it up, put it out there on the shelf. So all this is already history for God. That's why he's always known what comes next. He wrote it. Like any author writing a book. You want to go back through that way, or you want to go on down?
Go on down.
So anyway, they were praying God's will after that. It wasn't long after that he got sent home to die. Now, I wasn't privy to that. I wasn't told about it. That's another situation that I probably never will go into on here. But anyway, I was called in after family and friends and friends of friends had done been told was already there at the funeral home. I'll just say that. But that was all right, because that wasn't my daddy in that casket. He done left. What was in that casket was just a shell that he traveled this life in. And I cried one tear at that funeral. They all probably thought I was cold. But no, I'm just brass tacks, matter of fact. He lived his life. He met his time that had already been set in stone for him to go home. And he suffered no more. And yeah, that just ticked Piggy off. He walked in, he saw Daddy saying that, and then he walked into the family waiting room, saw everybody praying for the Lord to bring him through one last time, and I called them a bunch of selfish so-and-sos for wanting to do that to Daddy. Wanting him to have to suffer more for their sake. Well, Daddy done suffered enough, and he got it right, and he was ready to go. I can accept that. It's hard. I miss him. I got 2 good years of father-son relationship with him. You know what? It's better than none. I finally learned to forgive him for his ways in his younger days, and him being a drunk growing up, and a few other things. Everything. The reason why I was able to forgive him is because I had learned something about his problem. There's a reason why it gets a hold of you. There is a very palpable thing about it. That alcoholic, when alcohol gets in the body of an alcoholic, some of it don't go through the liver. It's taken straight to the brain, where a biochemical process takes place that leaves a liquid chemical in the brain that is the chemical cousin to the residue left behind by a heroin user. That's why a stage 5 alcoholic is called slush brain, because it's got a lot of it in it. And they can sniff out alcohol anywhere in a room where it's been hidden, even if they've never been in that room, because that chemical takes over. And for anybody to be able to get away from it is a heck of a thing, because you're fighting something else that basically turns your body into an alcohol-seeking animal. But he got away from it. It's also why they call it a gateway drug. But he got away from it, and the Lord's help, he beat that, and everything. But I was able to come to understand that. You know, that he couldn't help himself. And, had a problem. He didn't know how to date. Now, folks, one of the reasons he came that way, but number one, his body was already inclined to be alcoholic, because that's what happens in the body of an alcoholic. I don't think they've discovered yet why it's that way, but anyway, go right again. Go right and keep going.
We can go right.
And anyway, he made it. It still killed him in the end, but I was able to understand, and I had 2 years father-son with him finally before he passed away. I got to know a good side, everything. Folks, when he was growing up, it was literally one of those situations. The only thing in the refrigerator was beer. And to satisfy the stomach, they'd get him a beer drinking. And then there we go. So, you come by it honest. Happened with him honest. It was rough.
Yeah.
My step-grandfather was a POS. He was mean. Thankfully, when I was getting to know him, he was bedridden in a hospital bed, blind and couldn't do for himself. I'd hate that on anybody, even my worst enemy, but we walk this life, we make our own bed, so to speak. The decisions and choices we make definitely have an effect on how we end.
See it.
So my daddy said them beautiful grasshoppers in that dream he told me about. And then him being able to tell that young couple what he did while his body was in the throes of severe cramps, and him just as clear-eyed as could be, voice just as normal as could be. Well, you know, folks, y'all can't tell me there ain't heaven and hell.
We're going to have to end it there, Piggy Marm. Getting to hurt from holding this.
All right, well, it's out there.
All right.